welcome to the Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur podcast. I recently interviewed your dad about Buraq HR, and you guys are actually working all together. I just want to learn a little bit more about your perspectives on how you see the company, because you grew up with it, right? And also you're helping your dad. So the perspective that you guys would have would be a little bit different versus your dad starting it from, because like he has experience, wisdom, and other things that you guys don't have, right? Whereas you guys are just learning little bit by bit by bit. And it's like, okay, how can I help my dad in this way or this way or this way? My dad, unfortunately, I don't know, maybe not unfortunately, but I would say like he wasn't so entrepreneurial, though also he did have a desire. And my mom was the more entrepreneurial one in our entire family. So I guess let's go ahead and get started here. I want to know a little bit more about both of you. Tell me a little bit more about yourselves, where you grew up, and a little bit more about your roles and what you guys are currently doing right now.
Sure. First, thanks for having us. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And just a little bit about myself. My name is Uzair and Ammar Mutaqi. I was born and raised in Danbury, Connecticut. Okay. So I'm from the tri-state area. I was between Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey for a little bit. I was studying in New Jersey and in New York for a little bit. But mostly in Connecticut. I moved down here to Atlanta in 2017.
Okay.
And for the pursuit of education, Islamic education. And I've been a part of my dad's company since 2020, so COVID. So luckily, COVID, it was an opportunity for me to kind of learn the business. I had a lot more free time. I was at home mostly. So obviously, I was still going to school, but I had that free time. So I've been involved ever since. And yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Okay. And what about you, Ammar?
My name is Ammar Mutaqi, and I was also born in Danbury, Connecticut. And, I moved to Atlanta around 7 years ago. And my experience, I started working in my dad's company around 2020 as well. But my dad's company served more as a client because I actually started a marketing agency back in 2020 called LiftPad Marketing. And initially, the focus was more like general marketing, and then I focused on email marketing. And currently, I'm focusing on my education. So more of my focus on education and the business on the side, and I help my dad on the side as well.
Okay, so how many hours do you typically dedicate for like Buraq or my HR?
Maybe like 10 hours a week, maybe.
Okay, and what about you, Uzair?
I'm more involved now because I've graduated high school. I'm going to college. So
What are you studying, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm actually doing a master's in Islamic finance. It's a little different than what most people do. So I'm actually studying in a university that's in Malaysia remotely. The reason why I selected that is because of the specific program, which is Islamic finance. That's like a future plan kind of thing, a future industry which I believe will grow. So that's education.
It's absolutely going to grow. I mean, there's so many, like Malaysia is a hot spot for Islamic finance, right? Because, I mean, you have Dr. Muhammad Abu Bakr, I believe, who is one of the top scholars in Islamic finance. You have, what's his name? Taqi Usmani in Pakistan, Darul Uloom. And then you have a couple of scholars here stateside. You have not Omar Suleiman, but
Mufti Abar Mirza in Chicago.
There are a couple more. And then Muhammad Al-Ghari is another one. So, I mean, I've also had an interest in Islamic finance, and that was, I guess, ever since I wanted to get into business.
You work for guidance.
I worked for guidance, yes, but also outside of that, I mean, I also worked in finance. So, I mean, I studied American finance.
Okay.
But I didn't have an avenue when I was, 10 years ago. No, more than 10 years ago, 14 years ago at this point, where Islamic finance wasn't at the same level as it is today. Right? It's a lot more prevalent today than it would be 14 years ago. At that time, it was like just blossoming. Like the fruits were barely coming out. Right? And only one or two companies actually had an interesting idea or concept or way of teaching it. And even today, it's like a lot of people have a misconception. Oh, it's like it's the same thing as, as traditional finance. But the problem, I think, is more so, I think in Islamic finance, at least maybe you can guide me a little bit better here. The idea is more so of ownership and equity versus debt financing. So what is the difference between the two? And essentially, debt financing is extending the value of something that doesn't really exist as of yet. right? So like if I have a house, I can go get a loan on it, and the bank will make, a certain amount of interest, right? Whereas in a profit sharing model, like a musharaka, right? It's more of an equity based distribution where both parties are benefiting in some way, shape, or form. But it's the structure that severely matters, right? Because it's like one can be structured as debt and one is structured as equity.
Exactly.
And that is the key difference that you begin to see in Islamic finance. It's like, oh, how do I structure a contract? And well, that's a little bit of a tangent, but I guess we can get back to a little bit more about, Buraq HR and my HR. So you're dedicating about 10 hours and you're dedicating a lot more time while you study in the remote university. What do your day-to-day activities look like?
So being a part of a startup, I would say, because Buraq HR is a startup. My HR is our company that we've had since 2011. Buraq HR started more recently, and I can talk a little bit about that. Being a part of a startup, a small organization, you get to wear a lot of hats, right? So I like to say that I do a little bit of everything. I am involved in pretty much every aspect in some shape or form. So for example, the sales cycle, when we have calls with prospects and meetings to kind of educate them about our solution, then although I may not be directly selling, I'm still learning. I'm still in that learning stage when it comes to selling the solution. I'm learning more and more. I'm always involved in, for example, post-call preparation of the call, post-call proposal creation.
So what is post-call? What does that mean?
Post-call means like after we have a call, okay, what action items do we have?
Okay.
Right. So
CTAs are called to actions. Basically,
Right.
you itemize those, and then whatever else needs to
Exactly.
be done, you push it out to the
Exactly. So
respective
like
parties.
we have like a decently long sales life cycle. So usually you have to go through multiple iterations. You have to have proposals. Yeah, they ask for materials. They ask for more information about this.
What materials would exist in an HR company? Just out of curiosity, because I'm like, isn't that material or the human capital is your asset?
Right.
Right. So then is it physical materials or like what are we? I thought what talking
Material
about
as in like more like documentation about something. So
Okay.
I guess maybe it'll be helpful if I talk a little bit about what Buraq HR does.
Got it.
So Buraq HR serves as the middleman between the middleman. So we know recruiters, we know staffing agencies. They are the middleman between the employee, the potential employee, and the company that's hiring, right?
Got it.
So Buraq HR is the middleman between the recruiter or the staffing agency and the company. So at Buraq HR, we manage the staffing vendors of the company. With that, there is a lot of things that we do. So we make sure that these vendors are maintaining compliance with, labor regulations, making sure that they're maintaining compliance with company policies and program rules, making sure that invoicing is accurate, right? So imagine, like, for example, let's say you're a Danial LLC. You get invoices from your recruiting agency, but then they have a PO number that's messed up, and you're doing federal contracting, and that's a big deal. So when you get the invoice, then you have to push it back. Right? So we act as the extra layer of kind of making sure vetting those invoices. We also make sure through technology, through what we call a vendor management system, we bring visibility into the entire workforce and vendor base. So we bring visibility into how much you're spending, visibility into performance of vendors, right? So if we have 10 vendors, 8 of them are performing, we need to solve that, right? Stuff like that. So we kind of bring a lot of efficiency to the table, efficiency, cost savings.
So define what a vendor is for a second. I mean, like, what does that look like? A vendor would that be the client in this case, or like
No.
Fortune 500, or who is that?
The vendor is the staffing agency.
Got it.
That's
Okay.
providing the service.
Got it.
Right, so a vendor is a person who
Because you're in the middle of the middle. Okay,
Right.
makes sense.
So we're kind of like procurement, like we're buying, but we're also selling. So we're in the middle. Why would a company, use our solution? Because if you want to manage your vendors in-house, there's a lot of costs involved, and especially if you have a large program, right? We're talking about companies that have program in the millions, right? They're spending millions per year on contingent labor. Contingent, when I say contingent, I mean contract
labor,
right? And contract labor, by the way, is not specific with staff augmentation. It's also SOW, right? So
SOW for the audience is scope of work.
scope of work.
Got
right?
it.
Scope of work is companies have IT suppliers, right? they're providing, like, for example, Oracle implementation or Salesforce,
Of
right,
course.
for their various needs. So it's kind of it includes the entire umbrella. So I think kind of went on a tangent.
No, it's all good. It's good. You answering the question. So I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I guess now, what's your involvement in Ammar?
So my brother's more involved in like the day-to-day stuff, and I'm more involved on the outside, the marketing and like.
Okay.
So like for example, we have our main source of social media marketing is LinkedIn, obviously, because we're a B2B business. So and we're also working on a podcast for the future under a new name called NAS Fluent.
Okay.
So those are the two main focuses, and also email marketing, obviously, because obviously when you have a B2B business, right, your focus should be reaching the business directly. Like some people say you should run ads, but in a B2B business, I don't believe running ads is most useful. That's my opinion.
I guess it depends on the business, right? I mean, like, how are you targeting now? I mean, like, email marketing, obviously, I mean, most people sleep on it. Most companies sleep on it. I mean, you'll typically have, if assuming that you have a well-crafted email that's short, succinct, maybe at an 8th to 9th grade level, you'll have a higher level of conversion. What I've seen is like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40 to 50% conversions in some cases, depending on who's signed up for that list. Now, if you've bought a list, totally different, right? Because now it's a completely cold audience. You don't have any relationship with them, or maybe it's not correctly aligned with them. Like if you're like in the case of Diary of a Muslim Entrepreneur, I'm only targeting Muslims, right? In general, that's the majority of, or converts, reverts, right? Or people who are interested in it. Whereas, let's say in your case, you're actually targeting not just the employees, but you're targeting companies, right? So you're going on both ends of the stick. You're B2B and B2C. So it's like, okay, how do I find a good path? Or maybe would you have two different sets of newsletters, one dedicated towards this channel and one dedicated towards this channel? Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
So you're saying that one for customers and what's the other one?
To the businesses, basically. So you have the employee side and the business side.
So I wouldn't say that necessarily you should have an email list, or you could have an email list for employees. But I think mostly that's the recruiter's job usually to deal with that. The client side is usually like my side where we deal, and I wouldn't agree with in a B2B business to send mass emails. That's one thing. In a B2B business, you should send individual emails and they should be personalized.
Is this only related to HR, or is this would you say this is a general consensus across most businesses? Because I mean, I wouldn't say that to, let's say, a YouTuber who has 1 million followers or so, right? So is this contextual to that?
It depends on the purpose of the newsletter. Some people, their purpose is just education, and then maybe throw a product in once in a while. Our purpose would be just direct sell, or just getting a touch. Like getting. So they if you get a touch, then they'll be get some awareness of your company at least. But if someone has the purpose of education, then maybe they can.
So what's the purpose of the newsletter that you would create for the HR company then?
I wouldn't call that a newsletter necessarily.
Okay. Or email blast.
Yeah, you
or
can
whatever you
email
want to
blast. I guess that purpose was to get awareness of the company, right? And then we have a whole system where we do touches, and then after a few touches, they get some awareness of your company, and maybe you never know, you run into them at an event, and then.
So how do you market this? I know I asked this question of your dad, but I want to know from your perspective. I mean, because you might have a different perspective than your father. How would you market this kind of a company? Because it's a very interesting spot in the overall market. Most people, again, like they don't really think about HR. It's like it's not the sexy part of any business. It's like I have to hire this person, I have to train them, I have to do this, I have to do this. Like it's a whole laundry list of things, and finding a person that fits well at the same time. How do you market this? Because I'm just curious in this case.
Can I answer that question?
Yeah, go for it.
So it starts with building a brand, right? And that takes time. And for us, the way that we've been doing it in terms of marketing is twofold, or maybe threefold. Number one is cold outreach, right? Cold outreach, you shouldn't really count it out. Cold outreach is effective, but obviously just a lot of volume that's required. So cold outreach is cold email, cold calling, and such.
So do you have a team dedicated for that now?
So we do have a team that does that. But that's you can't rely on cold outreach. Of course. So one thing that we found very effective recently, and obviously there is also networking events. But one thing that we found which is very effective is partnerships and collaboration. So go to people who have our customer, who know our customer, and be like, let's collaborate, have a commission structure for them so that they sell on our behalf. I think that's something that we found to be
So
very
like
helpful.
affiliate marketing almost.
Almost, yeah, exactly.
Or that is actually
That
technically
is,
affiliate marketing.
they're acting as our affiliates.
Yeah.
So that's something that we've found to be very successful. We've ran ads before, just to just like a little test drive. We didn't really do it for long enough to see meaningful results.
So what was the duration that you guys ran ads for?
I believe it was some time ago. I think it was a year ago. We did, I think, for about a month or two. We're just testing it out.
Yeah. You need to do it for way longer.
Yeah.
At least at a minimum,
Yeah.
from what I've seen, at least with the Scovilles and the other restaurants and other businesses that I've touched, it's a minimum of 3 months.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, with 2 months of data, it's incomplete. Meaning that you have a whole year-long cycle. If you've done it for a whole year, even if the spend is little, I would still do it because then it would give me indicators, right?
Right.
And because I'm directly targeting my direct audience, right? Versus if I do organic, it's like whoever's already following me is getting that data, but the people who do not follow me is who I want to get it to. So it's like maybe reduce the spend and extend it out. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that we've learned, at least in the restaurant space, and outside of that as well.
I think the restaurant space has a lot of bigger audience. Our audience in a B2B.
I mean, the ticket size is also smaller, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like if you're comparing like $10 items, $20 items versus thousands of dollars, right? Because a human capital asset, right, is not going to be cheaper than 50, 40 grand, right?
Yeah.
They're just not. And if you're thinking about 25% of that as a potential like dollar amount that you as the HR company are going to receive. But in your case, I know from my understanding with your dad, it was that most of the labor that you guys have is contract labor. So
Right.
you're getting a percentage or a dollar on top, right?
Right.
And for however long the duration is. So it's more recurring revenue in that sense,
Yes.
not explosive revenue.
Yeah.
Right? So it's interesting because like when you think of it like that, it impacts the cash flow of the business so dramatically.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Like if I'm hiring a CEO at $1 million and I'm getting 20, probably the percentage would be a bit lower on the higher dollar amounts, but like let's say 20%, right? That's 200 grand. It's like, oh wow. And if I hire a CEO, a fractional CEO at an hourly rate, let's say $500 an hour, and you turn around and sell it to a company for $700 an hour, right? The $200 spread is what you guys make, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah, so it's actually, like you said, there's two aspects, and we're kind of gearing towards my HR. And the reason I'm making a distinction is my HR is that staffing agency that does find that labor. Buraq HR is more the company that manages those staffing agencies. So in that, there's like two aspects. So that those direct hire, as you call it, permanent placements, where you have like a C-level or even like a engineer or whatever, and you build 20%, that helps you build cash flow and liquidity basically. That kind of helps you keep the boat rolling, and then you can run payroll through that. Because keep in mind, when we hire through contract labor, we are the employer of the record, meaning we are running the, we're the
you're
employer.
running the payroll,
Exactly.
you're taking care of the compliance, even the regulatory side of whatever country they're being hired from in that case, right? So I completely get that piece because I've dealt with JustWorks and a couple other companies such as Gusto and some others and Deal, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they do offer those same capabilities, but I guess what would make so Buraq is the one that's doing that, or is that my HR?
Being the employer of the record.
Yeah.
That's my HR.
My HR.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the distinction between the two companies, what makes tell me again what the difference is between the two.
Sure. So my HR is the staffing agency, the staffing firm that is finding the contract labor or the people. Buraq HR is managing other companies like my HR for an organization.
Okay.
So let's take like EY for example, right? EY probably has like 100 staffing agencies that support them because they have a lot of contingent labor or contract labor, right? They hire a lot of contract labor globally. So they might have, let's say, for example, 100 staffing agencies like my HR. To manage them, right, is a lot of overhead. A lot of people need to be involved. You have to have a lot of team members, a lot of experience. So we kind of bring our team's experience in managing those programs. So and we also implement the technology side. And this is why I would call Buraq HR if I wanted to kind of give a very simple definition, is a technology-enabled vendor management services provider. I know that's a mouthful. Technology-enabled meaning we don't own the technology, but we have third-party partners. So we implement that VMS, that vendor management system for the companies, and we manage, and our team manages the workforce or all their vendors in that system. Hopefully.
No, yeah, I mean that distinction. Thank you for the clarity. That helped me distinguish between the two. I mean, like, so I'm just curious. If you didn't have your dad dealing with HR and having this exposure to HR, what would you guys be doing? Like, I mean, you obviously have more of a marketing tilt, and you are, interested in Islamic finance. Would you be going in those respective fields? Like, give me a little bit of sense of that.
Initially, I had like a marketing business, right? So and the way I came to that was because during COVID, obviously being a teenager with too much time on my hands, you watch YouTube, and then
whether it's an SMMA or something,
and then you start with that, and then and then like for me, for example, the first 7-8 months I didn't make any money. Then month 9, I got my first client, and then it was like back to back to back to back, So based on like after that, I realized my passion was marketing. So if I were not to have my dad's business, I'd probably be working marketing or start a marketing agency again.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, how long did you have your marketing agency? How long did you run it for? What kind of revenue figures did you hit?
It was not crazy revenue, obviously, being a teenager, right? But it was, I had it for around 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So revenue-wise, like, were you hitting 5 figures, 6 figures, anything like that?
I would say like 3 figures.
Okay, hey, it's better than nothing, right?
Or 4 figures.
Hey, I mean, like, look, that's how you learn, right? By trying. It's like, if you don't take step number 1, how are you supposed to get to step 2, 3, 4? I mean, like, it's not every day that I mean, like, just think of how many people have started and failed. At least you went past that stage. You actually got client number 1, right? Now the problem is repeating it and doing it over again and rinse and repeat. And many people don't think that business is it's a cycle. It's a repeat cycle of doing the same thing over and over again, and that generates value, right? Some people think it's supposed to be sexy or beautiful. Like it's different every day, and the reality is it's not. It's actually doing a lot of boring stuff consistently over a long period of time, and that's where you get the outsized returns. And I think that's a struggle I faced early on in my life, is that, I mean, alhamdulillah, I was blessed in this capacity where like my mind can actually handle like lots of different things, whether it's engineering, creative stuff, it's finance, it's, even media creation to a degree. It's like I have the capability to do all these things. But had I focused on just one thing, it would have made me exponentially even better. But alhamdulillah, whatever has happened is now let's grow in another way, right? But tell me a little bit more about what you would be doing if the HR company didn't exist.
It's funny that you ask because it just takes me back to COVID when I was watching these YouTube videos, about Amazon FBA and drop shipping. I was like, bro, you can become a millionaire. Like that's the picture.
That's what everybody was painting, right?
Right. So I was actually very, very close to starting an Amazon FBA store. I did a lot of research. I learned a lot. I spoke with people. I ended up not going forward because of the capital that was involved. There was a lot of upfront capital involved in terms of buying inventory and such. So at that point, that's when I decided to adjust. If I wasn't involved with my dad's company, I would probably be. I was about to become a CPA. I was about to get into accounting and become a CPA, because I did accounting before I started the Islamic finance. I was studying accounting, so I might have gone that route. So maybe accounting and finance, something around that.
I mean, that's what my route was pretty much. I originally went, I went straight to finance. Actually, my mistake. I was pre-med, then I shifted over to finance. For me, it was like my dad and we were having a dispute. Like, I'm not passionate about it. And I mean, like, my entire family was in the automotive industry in Pakistan. And, well, not just automotive, but jewelry and other things outside that. Jewelry, gold, I mean, diamonds, like, actual like Like they would cut diamonds in a shop and then sell it. Like,
wow.
yeah. So
They had like their own businesses. Okay.
yeah, the Buraq Khandan is like that. The whole entire family on my mom's side, even my dad's side, partially from my cousins, same thing. My dad's brothers are in the in the construction slash automotive reselling. So they're basically reselling automotive parts or automotive accessories.
Okay.
Let's see, and one of my dad's brothers actually was an accountant in Saudi.
Oh, okay.
And then one was a teacher or a principal. So in higher education, that's where he landed.
So what kind of you did consulting? Went into finance. What kind of consulting did you do?
So mine was more so business performance optimization. So like, okay, you have a finance organization of a company, right? We're doing mergers and acquisitions. So mine was focused specifically in that sector and global shared services. So let's say Colgate is wanting to expand into India or into Poland or these other major hubs where talent is specifically targeted towards a specific kind of, predisposition, you could say, right? Like if you go to India, you're mainly going for IT, software development, and maybe even a little bit of accounting, right? You're not going to go for anything else, really. You go to Poland, you're mainly targeting like IT talent, right? In Czech, we would target HR talent, strangely enough, right? If we go to Switzerland or Turkey, we're looking at manufacturing, actually, because they have plenty of water. Water is needed for any sort of manufacturing. So on the manufacturing side of things, you're doing stuff a little bit differently, right? And then China, obviously, because of cost of goods and raw resources. Even Africa to a degree, right? Africa is so rich with resources that you could actually build multiple manufacturing plants. And the Chinese have invested so much in Africa. If you go into the South African airport of Johannesburg, oh my God, it's like so many Chinese banks own the entire thing.
Wow.
And they've invested so much. They were even planning on putting like high-speed rail and a bunch of other things in South Africa. And this is not just Cape Town. This is Johannesburg and some other parts. And this is very, very interesting to see. And then in Latin America, I'm looking at engineers. In Colombia, you have some really, really solid talent that's like, okay, Colombia, I have engineers. I have architects. I have I have a different skill set that they're known for. And then even in Mexico, most of the activity, at least in the United States, shifted all to Mexico for accounting and finance. So like all the back office activities that were not really client facing all shifted. And then all the front office activities like sales, marketing to a degree split, but sales was retained in each of the specific locales. Because like, oh, I have a client, or let's say Kroger's in Cincinnati, or Macy's, for example. We sell products to those companies. We need a salesperson in that area touching base with their headquarters in order to make a sale, right? And the contractual obligations, obviously, and all that stuff. So it's interesting to see how like that kind of experience led to me getting into more business performance optimization. So when it comes to like,
So how would you sorry to cut you off,
yeah,
but
no worries.
I'm
How
curious.
to optimize a business?
Yeah.
That's a good question. So, for example, I'll give a good example. When I was actually working in Morocco for Colgate, back then, the issue that they had was that most of their systems were paper-based. Like, they were not computerized. This is back 10 to 14 years ago. It's old, but most of their systems were never updated. They had all their records on paper. Systems were not reporting back up through SAP. So the SAP subsystems that they had weren't optimized for reporting back to their headquarters in New York. So I would actually implement SAP as a system into Morocco. We'd set up the systems, translate everything from the past, push it in, and then have historicals. So like from that aspect, from a reporting standpoint, it was like, oh, I have data coming in from this country, this country, this country, this country, this country. We actually transformed what the organization looked like. So that's what you call a global finance transformation, right? Now, more recently, like when my EY days, what we would do is, okay, we're running this system. Maybe we transition from an SAP to an Oracle, because we get more visibility in our organization, more quicker data, right? So then that way, from a business standpoint, if I get data faster, that means I can make more qualified decisions versus my peers or competitors, right? So that the internal data wars basically happened, I guess, in the past 10 to 15 years. And that was business process optimization, realistically speaking. Sometimes, in some cases, what we would do is we would actually interview entire departments and figure out, oh, this is what this person is doing. This is what this person is doing. This is what this person is doing. And we would leverage what's known as APQC. APQC was a taxonomy. A taxonomy is basically like a list of all tasks within a finance organization or an accounting organization or a manufacturing, procurement, or HR or reporting, anything related to any company. There was a taxonomy that you could actually go look at. Consulting companies would take a look at this. They would then leverage that and they'd say, okay, we're going to create what's known as a work activity analysis. They're going to go and interview hundreds of people inside of the organization. They're going to map out all those processes and create like a web, right? Oh, this interfaces with this task over here. Once finance does this, it hits procurement. Procurement then pushes it back, and then it goes through. So the sequencing of all the tasks within a company.
That's actually a part of what I do as well, workflow mapping. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but when you mentioned that, like, that's also kind of a part, like, identifying bottlenecks in the processes and then figuring out how we can maybe automate some stuff too.
We call that workflow process flowing, basically.
Yeah.
And then once we map it all out, digitize it, all that stuff, and then we create what's known as a RACI matrix.
Yes.
Responsibilities, accountability, consulted, informed, right?
Yeah.
And then also outside of that, we would have standard operating procedures for each of the tasks, right? So it was only after the overarching like ring of key tasks or key company objectives were established that these things could flow down. And in the case of one of the companies that I'd worked with, it was two companies merging. So now imagine having to do double the work, right? And then seeing, okay, this is the comparison between company A and company B. Okay, they have multiple manufacturing plants. Let's say one's in Aguascalientes, Mexico, and then you have another one in Czech Republic doing the same thing. Or and then you have another manufacturing plant in maybe Honduras, which is not even 1,000, 2,000 miles away. So it's like, okay, how do I shut down this plant? Do I keep this plant alive? Is my cost of goods going to be higher here? Am I expecting this to be higher here? What would like trade tariffs, how would that affect if somebody gets elected in the United States or in Mexico or in Honduras or in Europe, right? I mean, so you're predicting those kinds of like events inside of the financial models even to a degree. So like that kind of stuff was what I was doing. That's basically what most of my work had entailed. It was optimizing a business top to bottom, whether it was in finance, procurement, whatever else. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I mean, I got lucky in a sense because, like, I mean, when I started working for corporate America, first year I was blowing through it. I got promoted twice in 1 year, and then promoted one time after that, and it was so rapid in the sense that I was able to push an organization and change their direction in a way. Although I felt like a pawn to a degree because like you had KPMG basically dictating the terms of, okay, this is what you got to do. I didn't understand it at the time. It's only when I started working at EY that, oh, it all pieced together. Like, oh, this is actually what was supposed to happen. It was only after retrospectively thinking about it that, oh, this is what the whole entire life cycle actually is. And it took about a couple of years to figure it out. But alhamdulillah, I got lucky in that sense. Because, I mean, I also got to visit, multiple countries. I got to live in Europe for about 2 years.
Wow.
I got to live in North Africa, South Africa, Latin America.
Wow.
And that was also because I spoke multiple languages.
You speak multiple languages.
Español, Italiano, y Francais. So, and Urdu, and then Hindi, and then a little bit of Gujarati. And I mean, I learned a little bit of Punjabi too, but like, it's the proclivity to learn that helped me achieve a lot in my life. So that's pretty much what I've done.
It's pretty cool.
And to a little tiny extent. I think I have way more to learn. I've established companies. I've bought companies. I haven't sold any yet, which I'm working on selling one actually. But it's not easy. It has not been easy to sell any company. It's easy to acquire to a degree, but I didn't acquire right. So That's so we covered basically like where you guys what you guys would do had HR not been a thing in your lives. What was just out of curiosity for both of you, like what was the most significant thing you've learned at working for your dad's company?
I would say soft skills. So communication, coordination, escalation as in like, okay, we have an issue, then how do we know who's going to solve it, and taking it to that person. Because, we're not in a very technical industry. Although now with Buraq HR, it is a little technical because we do implement technology, right? So like implementing a VMS, it's not super, super technical, but I would say the main thing I learned was communication, building rapport. Like I still today, although I'm more involved in Buraq HR than I am in my HR, I still manage some accounts from my HR, right? Which is some accounts that I brought in, or that I was tasked to do, and I still manage them because of the relationships as a whole. So building relationships, rapport, I would say that's the main thing that I kind of took from there. And I think really in whatever field you go to, whatever business you go into, those skills are extremely crucial. Job interviewing, it's all about communication. It's all about knowing how to talk.
Yeah.
People who, as we say, BS, they can usually get past.
Yeah, that's so true. And then at the same time, it's how you convey a message, right? I mean, I remember when I was at Colgate, one of the things that we had to consistently do was implement change management, because now you're changing an organization, right? How it's structured, how it's functioning, and then communicating those ideas and thoughts to the employees who don't understand, right? So communication is definitely a key thing in most businesses, but I guess let's go ahead and hear your answer.
I would say what I learned is that I really understood that business is multifaceted, There's, if you don't understand business, then you would just think it's just get clients, make money. It's not that simple, right? Yeah. There's finance, there's sales, there's marketing, and then there's dealing with clients, and then that's another headache right there, and there's so many facets of business, and once you really learn that, it opens your mind, and you realize that business isn't easy. All these gurus online, they make you think that business is like something.
Well, the concept is easy. The implementation is hard, right? It's like, I actually have to go talk to people to make the sale, to get them to convince them that this is going to provide them some sort of value, right? And that's the hard part. Most people don't think about it. So I completely agree with you there. Couple of other questions here. So I believe you currently are you're serving as the director of the MSP operations, right? And outside of that, like at my HR, are you in a similar role or?
Yeah, I would say similar, as in I'm still involved in operations to a certain extent. So like if it's a strategic move that we need to do, I'm involved. And my involvement, though, has decreased a lot over time as we've transitioned to this new company, Buraq HR. So currently, I'm more involved just in strategic updates and strategic moves, such as, for example, if we are going to make a big change, if we're moving ATS or CRM, well, that's not a huge change, but, for our small company, then I'm usually involved in buying decisions.
So ATS would be the applicant tracking system?
Yeah.
Got it. And
applicant tracking system. If we're buying something, if we're anything procurement, like I'm usually involved to a certain extent. And then I manage some accounts, as I mentioned before. For Buraq, I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything. MSP operations. MSP stands for Managed Service Provider.
Yeah. Your dad and I had a conversation about that. I was like, what is that exactly, right?
Yeah.
But go ahead and explain it one more time, please.
Yeah, I mean, Managed Service Provider is the term that's used. I don't like using that term because it doesn't really tell you what we do. So Managed Service Provider is basically a company like Buraq HR that manages their vendors. So you have MSPs and managed service providers in IT, for example. You have IT MSPs that manage their IT vendors. So we're just the same thing. We're just managing staffing vendors instead. So that's kind of.
So just out of curiosity, how would you describe your like leadership style? I can only imagine how because if I know that if I was working with my dad, right, we would butt heads so often because the way we think is fundamentally different. There's a difference in terms of an age gap, in terms of understanding that surely that has to exist in your organization too. Like, do you guys ever butt heads? Like, how do you solve those kinds of hey, I want to do something this way, and your dad wants to do something else, some other way. Like, how do you reconcile that?
Well, actually, I think that's actually an advantage because, like for myself and my dad, we have different skill sets, different mindsets that actually complement each other. So oftentimes, we have different ideas and different ways of approaching things. And luckily, my dad is open to hearing me out. So we usually find a middle ground. Sometimes, I have to, we have to go with what he says. Sometimes we have to go with what I say. So I wouldn't say we're, the super desi style where like my way or the highway kind of thing.
Got it.
So we kind of work together to kind of come up with a solution. But I think personally, like it's good because you get different perspectives.
Yeah. So how much leniency does your father offer you in terms of the business? Like what parts and pieces you control? Like, I mean, like, are you only functioning in certain areas and your dad functions in certain areas? I mean, like, tell me a little bit more, maybe more about that piece.
Well, I would say it's pretty free flow. I was able to, with my responsibilities that I've taken on, I'm able to give my dad a little more time to focus on more strategic things, business development, growing the business, the vision, which is what the CEO and the founder should be doing. So kind of me handling more of the inside the business kind of things.
Your ops, basically.
Right, ops.
Internal ops.
Exactly. So I have that flexibility. And, we have team members as well. So it's not just, me doing everything. We have people who are also involved in specific operations. Like, for example, if we're in my HR, we have recruitment operations. We have people for that and such. So that's kind of how, like, it's pretty free flow, to be honest.
So just curious, I mean, like, tell me a little bit more about your leadership style. Like, is it like, do you tend to micromanage? No offense, no offense. It's just curiosity, I'm curious because like the way I manage people is a bit different. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give a directive. Hey, let me show you how to do something. And then from there, I want to see how you do it. And then I'll guide and tweak just a little bit. And then from there, I'll like, okay, you got it, right? I'll go ahead and micromanage to an extent, and then I'll pull myself back. Tell me a little bit more about your management style.
And it's a work in progress. I'm still learning a new skill that I'm learning. And there are different leadership styles, and there's no one that's right.
I agree.
Right? Like when you read like Islamic history, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he had a very specific leadership style. He was more of like delegation.
Yes. Whereas Umar ibn Khattab totally different. He was
very involved in every single step.
Exactly.
And he was more like how some people would say micromanaging. So there's no right or wrong. Yeah. What I would say, it's kind of similar to what you described is, I would basically hold the person's hand, right? Whatever work they do, I would supervise it for them, right? So at that point, it's a little bit more micromanagement. But once they've earned the trust and I know that they can do the job better than anyone else, then I'm kind of hands off.
Usually, it's my switch point is about 70 to 80%. If they're 70-80% as good as me, it's good enough, and then they will get better with time. At least that's the idea that I put in my head. I don't know if that's always valid or true. Sometimes what I've noticed is some employees just simply tank, and you have to make a hard decision, right? Hey, I'm going to talk to you about it once, twice, thrice. And also it depends on the person that you're interacting with to a degree, right? Some people are like, you tell them once and they're running and gunning. And then some people you need a lot more hand-holding. And then some people need a lot more hand-holding. And it's like, so you have this different dynamic of people that it's not a one-size-fits-all, unfortunately. I wish maybe some of the business people in the community who are watching this, or even yourselves, could identify with that as well. So how do you guys stay motivated? Because if I'm not passionate about something, or it's not something I necessarily wanted to do, I find it very hard for myself to be engaged. How do you find yourself to be engaged in this? Is it because it's the interaction with your dad that promotes that? What is it that helps you stay motivated within this business and actively help? Because a lot of days, not a lot of days, but in more modern times, you're seeing a lot of like baby boomers who have children and their kids don't want to take on their parents' business. And it would be for a whole number of reasons, right? Maybe they're in HVAC and the kid is in accounting and finance or investment banking. And it's like, why would I do this, right? But in your case, what would that look like? Like, I mean, like, why do you want to take over your dad's business? Do you want to run it?
I disagree with the concept of motivation. If you're looking at it, say your father has a business and you have your own, and he wants you to work with you, right? He's making your job easier. You don't have to go through the hassle of, looking for a job and dealing with employers. Your job is easier. You're more relaxed. It just makes your whole job easier. It makes your whole career path easier. And with the business, you have more flexibility in terms of you have more freedom, right? Secondly, you have more room for growth. When you have a job, you're limited, right?
That's very true. But at the same time, wouldn't you sort of need a little bit of the pressure to grow, right?
Well, I
Because
disagree.
like, I mean, if you're in a relaxed environment, right? I know for myself, at least in the beginning, because I didn't have any sort of guide, I needed a little bit of pressure. I needed to be able to work in a somewhat structured manner so I could learn and then implement in my own business. In your case, it's a little bit different because you guys grew up with it, right? So it's a little bit different in that aspect. But but there still has to be some sort of motivation, right? Like if you're not interested in it, then I mean, that's a thought at least.
Right. You're right. I mean, and that's kind of the thing where a lot of kids, they're not really interested in the business, and that's fine. I think you kind of have to find what you like and then work on that part of the business.
Yeah.
Right. So if you like marketing, then
Focus on marketing.
focus on marketing. Right. If you like operations, focus on operations. If you like selling and talking with customers, you kind of have to find like. But at the end of the day, you're not gonna like 100% of what you do, but you have to have some kind of passion, which I do agree with. So that's kind of how you find that motivation. At the end of the day, even if I don't take over this business or we don't take over this business and we do something else, my main thing with coming into this company was that I'm gonna learn a lot, right? I'm gonna learn skills that because I started when I was 17. Most 17-year-olds don't get this opportunity. And I'm gonna learn skills that most people my age are not able to learn. So whatever I do in the future, whether that's starting another company or whether that's working for someone, these skills that I learn are gonna go a long way. Ideally, one of the main skills that I want to learn is scaling a business and then exiting, right? So this is an opportunity, a project for me that, hey, can I scale this? Can I play a part in scaling this business and then exiting? If you can exit a company, then
it's not easy. I
it's
will
not-
tell you that.
yeah.
I have scaled in previous companies. I've helped companies scale. Exiting is a whole different topic of conversation. I would want to bring an investment banker because I actually have a buddy of mine who's been working for Citi and a couple other companies in private equity. And when they buy companies or they help people exit, it's a very, very, it's almost like your baby's being scrutinized, right? Like the thing that I created is now like exposed to the world, and it feels very intrusive in some ways, in shape or form. And who knows? That may be your case. I have no idea, depending on what you guys decide for the company.
I would
itself.
say in our industry, I mean, I haven't gone through one, but from what I've seen around the people around me, it's actually a hot commodity. I've seen like staffing companies, for example, they sell for 3x, 5x, relatively easy because we've also tried acquiring companies. We're in the market, and when we look and we're in talks, the next day it's already sold.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the same thing with like accounting firms and other companies too. Like I've been actively looking at accounting firms left and right, and at least in Atlanta and Southeast in general. And the main reason I was looking at those is like, oh, I know exactly the levers to push to make that business go to $1 million, $2 million, $5 million EBITDA, because I've done it so many times in other firms, and helped other people get there. So it's like, it'll take time. You guys will get there. It's just a matter of time. So your management style versus your dad's, how is that different? And like, I mean, like, is your dad's management style a bit more direct, or is it more like, hey, let's listen to all the ideas on the table and then go with the best idea or the consensus? Is it more like how Abu Bakr or Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam or any of the other Sahabi that would rather grab consensus? Like, what's the management style from your dad?
I would say he's more like listening to all the ideas and coming up with a consensus, but obviously it has to make sense to us as the leadership of the company. At the end of the day, the decision is his or collectively mine
because
and
he's
his.
the CEO, right?
Right, exactly. And my mom is also involved, so
Okay.
she's also
So it's a
involved
family
in certain.
business, top to bottom.
Exactly. So she's also involved in decisions, high level decisions. So I would say he's kind of very, he delegates. He's always involved. He always holds their hand though, which is something that I've learned. I would say that mine is a little different. I think it's probably something that I would need to work on leadership style wise. I think if I self-diagnose myself, I'm a little, straight to business kind of guy. I think I need to work more on like team building and relationship and internal.
It's the same
internally.
issue that I face actually. I remember more so in the beginning of my career, it was very transactional. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I just need to get this thing done. Let's get it done, right? It's not like, oh, I'm actually building a relationship with someone else, right? And they didn't feel like they knew me. They knew the work version of me, but they didn't know me, right? And I think the older I get, the more I realize if people actually learn of me or know me, then they realize, oh, he's actually a really good person, right?
Yeah.
And I think we need to be a little bit more vulnerable in the workspace, at least from the examples that the Prophet ﷺ, as well as, I mean, if you look at the seerah and the stories of all the other Sahabi and how they did business, right? They were actually vulnerable to a degree. And the way they did business, they knew one another, right? Because they were all part of the same clan, right? Banu Hashim, Quraysh, right? So it's like, in their sense, they could do business a bit differently because they knew one another. But because this world has become so individualized, it's made it actually harder in that sense from a relationship standpoint. I guess the next question that comes into my mind is like, how do you guys manage stress within the business itself? Because like, obviously your role and your father's role and family's role involvement, that you guys probably know each other so much better than a team of people that have been assembled, right? And you probably can see the emotional triggers or stressors across the board. How do you manage stress in this particular business?
Main thing is not letting the stress carry over. So as a leader, you need to learn to absorb the stress and not let it go to the team. That's something that my dad has done very well, and that I've learned from him, that I'm still learning from him. Is we know what's happening, we know the problems, but not letting that go to, even if it's like outside of the business, right? You have certain issues, right? Life, there are ups and downs, but learning how to not let that go over. So dealing with the stress is what really helps is knowing that in the ma'al usri yusra, that ease comes after difficulty comes ease. So like this time is gonna pass, and we've been through this, right? We've gone through similar situations, and it's been fine, right? So you just have to go through this little struggle period, and after that, it'll be fine. So I think that kind of helps.
Got it. There was one topic of conversation your dad and I had, which we had a little bit of a differing opinion, which was more like factoring in the HR business. And he mentioned to me that factoring actually is not something that is permitted or halal. Can you explain the logic behind that? Because that was I thought factoring would be, because essentially they're facilitating a service for you to actually get capital or liquidity injection inside of the business, right? So then that way the business can perform its functions, especially because you guys are also running payroll, right? So maybe you can talk to me more about what's the logic? Why is this not something that we can do? Or is it permissible for a short period of time and then we can just eliminate it altogether? Especially if you're starting up a company, right? You don't have the liquidity and it's so painful, like $100,000, $1 million, $10 million just gone in payroll. And if you factor that and you're out of capital. So then like, walk me through this. I want to understand this a little bit better.
So by the way, business financing is an area that someone needs to fill. It's not accessible. Halal business financing. So if anyone who's watching is able to facilitate something like that, that's something that is really in demand. Now about your question about factoring, I've read about this matter. I've read fatwa. I've spoken with muftis. The principle in fiqh is that kullu qardin يجري, I can't remember in Arabic, but it's that every loan which carries a benefit for the loaner, that is riba, right? So in this case, they're providing a service, but essentially, if you look at the contract, they are giving you money and then they're getting money back with something extra on top.
It's money for money. Yeah.
Exactly. There's no asset involved, as opposed to Islamic financing. It's always asset backed, right? Whenever you're buying a house,
because
it's
the
backed by a
Prophet
house.
mentioned like gold for gold, wheat for wheat, dates for dates. I think there were a couple other things mentioned in that,
Yeah.
but like, and it has to be hand to hand, and that's
Yeah.
hard to facilitate in today's
Yeah.
environment. And then it also depends on the contract type. But
Yeah.
I guess in the case of factoring, it is money for money, right? You're
Yeah.
basically saying, okay, if I have $100, I'm going to give you 95. I'm going to
Right.
hold 5 back.
Right, exactly. So that's the issue. So I've thought about this a lot, and I've spoken with muftis, and this is the main fatwa that I've come across.
Well, wouldn't this? I mean, let's just extrapolate this idea a little bit further out, like because like in the case of like let's say guidance residential, right? The physical asset there is the house, right? But the financing contract in itself, it's attached to the house. But I guess this is where like debt contracts are like a big no-no, because it is literally money, and they're saying that they'll have control over that asset should you not pay, right? I guess, yeah, go ahead and continue. I guess I'm a little bit.
Yeah, I think when it comes to business financing, specifically like, worker capital or payroll, running payroll, it's very hard from an Islamic perspective to make that halal. The only way is, and the very crux of how Islam does financing is equity based.
Yeah, so like
Partnerships.
partnerships. Right? And then there's some sort of a profit distribution, right? In a musharaka type like structure. It can't be murabaha in this case.
Exactly.
Which is a purchase and resale for the audience. And then like it can't be an ijara because you're not renting anything.
Exactly. So it would have to be an equity based partnership where you would be like, hey, can you invest this much money and I'll give you this much equity in my company. This is a huge need in our Muslim business community. Because it's really hard to grow without capital.
Yeah, I mean, because like even if you look at the guidance model, it was a musharaka mutanaqis shirkatul milk, which is like a declining balance co-ownership. So the home is owned by both Guidance Residential, which is a private equity company, and you as an individual who's put down the down payment, right? So you both have to put money up. But then on the flip side, Guidance, what they do is they basically source additional investors into the deal, and then they're distributed a profit distribution from that as well.
Yeah.
So from that sense, I mean, Mufti Taqi Usmani approved that program, along with Dr. Muhammad Abu Bakr in Malaysia, and then you have Muhammad Al-Ghari in Saudi Arabia, obviously, and then Sheikh Talal de Lorenzo in California. It's interesting that like that. It's hard to scale that down to like a consumerized level, because then the profit rate should shoot up because the dollar amounts aren't as high, right? Because like in Pakistan, even like if you go to Mizan Bank, which is theoretically Islamic financing, they offer it, but I haven't actually taken a look at their contracts. But it's interesting just to note and CEO how do they structure their contracts. But like you said, it has to be equity based, and it's difficult to how would you scale that down on like consumer level? That's the hard part. Nobody's actually solved that problem yet.
It's hard. I guess maybe one way is how you have like wahid and different investment accounts where you can invest, where every individual can invest a certain amount and then they get a return. If you can have a model where instead of like, Wahid does it, or like UIF does it for residential properties, they invest in residential properties, you can take that and invest into businesses. Or maybe an Islamic bank starts and then they provide some kind of facility like this. Yeah. So it's really hard though to make it accessible, which I agree with.
I mean, at least with the laws inside the US, right? Because then you have to deal with the SEC regulations.
Yeah.
Because especially when it comes to crowdfunding or any sort of like private equity type investing, it falls under the SEC guidelines because they want to protect the consumer, and those laws that are in place make it incredibly hard, at least from the perspective of doing these kinds of business partnerships.
Yeah,
because it's like this big entity, this monolith is going to have all this cash, and they're going to deploy it, and you have the risk of losing it. But that's the element of what makes Islamic financing different, right? It's the element of profit and loss. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to note. But I mean, we'll definitely have more conversation in Islamic finance. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with both of you gentlemen today. Any sort of final words that you guys want to?
Nope.
Okay, well, cool. And it was a pleasure having both of you. Inshallah, if you guys have any sort of like links or like social media profiles, just let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and put it down in the comment section down below for the audience. And it was a pleasure having you guys.
Pleasure to be on this show. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.